out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Ryan.
Did I sound that lonely, scared, and desperate?
Yeah.
Hi,
but you
Tim.
look great.
Thanks. So do you,
Oh,
as
wow,
always.
thanks. I just woke up.
Great, as he drinks from his Spider-Man coffee mug.
Mm.
Well, hello, not just to Tim, but hello, everyone here listening, too. Welcome. Welcome to episode 99.
Fanfare
99.
for the penultimate episode.
The penultimate double-digit episode.
That's right.
Of Dismembering Horror. Dismembering Horror. It is the podcast show where myself, Ryan McDuffie, and...
Myself, Tim Aslin.
That's correct. We talk about what worked for us, what did not work for us, and anything else we found interesting or noteworthy about a horror film. And we speak of it in the spirit as if you had just watched it with us, and we're all just friends who got together, put our feet up on that table, and kicked back and watched a horror film together. And now we're going to see, well, as I said, what worked, what didn't work, and what we can glean from all there within to take on with our lives and our personal ventures, our creative ventures, every aspect of our lives. So that's also my way of saying, if you haven't watched the film, beware, for there are ruiners. I mean, spoilers abounded within.
Mold. So much mold.
What?
Because mold's a big indicator of something being spoiled.
Yeah, you're right.
I was reading up on mold yesterday.
Just because you have a mold problem?
No, because I saw a thing where somebody was asking the opinion of what's the best salad dressing. And people, like a lot of people were like, blue cheese. And one person kept responding to every single person who said blue cheese. Blue cheese has mold in it.
Okay. It gives it its flavor that way.
I know. But it was funny because I think, people... I then went down the rabbit hole of like how cheese is made, and like blue cheese in particular, or any cheese that has, mold in it, or that is fermented mold, whatever the fuck it is.
That whole question of like someone just declaring or wanting to know like what is the best blank, it just kind of really rubs me the wrong way. And
Agreed.
It's one way why on this show we're so deliberate in saying, hey, these are just our opinions. We encourage and expect you to disagree on all that good stuff.
You're wrong if you disagree, but we encourage it.
Yeah, but what's the best song of theirs? It's just like
best song ever. I don't know.
See, and then you might say what your favorite song is.
I don't have a favorite song. You know what annoys me in an equal sense to the like what's the best kind of question is also the what's your favorite question. What's your favorite movie? And I'm like, dude, I don't have one. I don't know.
I didn't have one up until like 5 years ago.
Until
or
you
something.
saw Midsommar.
No, my film. I thought of enough different angles for like what could constitute a favorite, and when grouping it with kind of like something I've loved the longest and nostalgia within it, and can still to this day, I'll say Pee-wee's Big Adventure is my favorite.
Wow.
Film. Yeah.
Cool.
And to me is the best film in a lot of ways. But we aren't here to talk about, actually that's going to be next week. Tune in. We'll be talking about bests and favorites and trying to navigate these tricky territory waters. Right. We're going to be celebrating episode 100 with some sort of reflection back on our 99 previous films.
That's right.
Including this one.
I gotta recalculate some things.
Yeah, no, we'll talk later and decide exactly what we're doing. But for now, last act, sorry for the chit chat, everyone. But we also say up front, if there's anything else like following up from previous episodes we wanted to say. Tim, remember a couple episodes ago for Phantom of the Opera, I brought up there should be a Scooby-Doo Phantom of the Opera. Of course, within their litany of Scooby-Doo films of the 2000s and onwards, there is Scooby-Doo Stage Fright from 2013.
Wow.
Join Scooby-Doo, Shaggy, and the Mystery Inc. crew as they head to Chicago for Talent Star, a hit talent show in which Fred and Daphne are finalists with some high hopes. Unlucky for them, the competition is frightful as the show is being broadcast from an opera house with a history of horrors and a particularly vengeful phantom that has cursed the show's production. And it's totally a direct, just Phantom of the Opera Scoob version.
That's cool.
So if you were there with us then, we are wondering, here's your answer. But
I always wondered what Scooby snacks taste like.
Good question. I hope you can find out and we'll report back someday.
I feel like they kind of are like somewhere in between a Nilla wafer and like a ginger snap.
I imagine like between a Nilla wafer and a dog treat.
Oh, right. They are kind of dog treats, aren't they? Ew, that's so weird. So Shaggy just is into dog treats.
You know the canon may be better. I forgot Shaggy was so into them. Anyways,
yeah.
we got a big movie to talk about here, Tim, from 1962. We're traveling back.
Yeah.
So
is it big?
So how about in my book it is, and right. it's a cult classic.
Yeah, okay.
It's been denoted and all that good stuff. So let's get into it with a trailer. We're talking about, as I said, from 1962. Here we go into the trailer. The film is called Carnival of Souls.
Action you've never seen races across your screen as you thrill to a new dimension in picture making. Carnival of Souls. This is the shocking story of a who crawled from the river to race through a nightmare, walking a tightrope between heaven and hell. From the unreal, she crashes through to reality. But try as she will to lead a normal life, she is torn from her goal. There's no privacy in a life she's ever watched, tormented. Either it's her neighbor, desirous of her physically, watching her with his leering eye, or it's the evil eye of the man who taunts her, the man who wants her. From the bottom of the river they come. They reach for her. They demand that she dance with them at the Carnival of Souls. She is a girl driven mad by the relentless forces of the beyond. He will not relent.
A new dimension of picture making.
You can't afford to miss it.
Nope. New dimension. Yeah, that's cool.
I like the first line of that trailer says, action you've never seen before. What?
I mean, sure. I know it's kind of like, yeah, but okay, interesting way to put it.
I'm pretty sure that there are movies before this that had action in them. Don't you think?
No, it doesn't. This doesn't say this is it didn't say this is the first movie with action. It said this is action you've never seen before.
Sure, I guess that's true. Like, yeah, fair enough. That's how the lawyers, were able to get that passed,
So, just for some context, into this film up front, rather than saving it for things of note, because this is like such a particular case. This was an independent film made by Herk Harvey, directed and produced it. Never heard the name Herk before, and written by John Clifford. So they worked together at for 35 years at an industrial film company making industrial, or PSA films, all that kind of thing. And this was their, let's take some time off and make a film with our skills that we've learned. And this was their only film like it they made.
Wow. This was it.
Yeah. Cool context for going into it. And after our partial trailer we just played for you, next is our rating per our rating system. Would ourselves, Tim and Ryan, tell Tim and Ryan to avoid it, stream it, rent it, or by Carnival of Souls. Tim, should you or I go?
I don't know. I think you should go.
You see, I'm ready. This film, Tim, it was so weird. I started watching it. I realized that I'd seen it before, like 10, 15 years ago, and my memory of it was pretty wrong. All I remembered was her just kind of like running around this carnival place the whole movie, and that was like not actually a lot of the film. But that's all I kind of really remembered of it. But sinking into it was interesting because knowing that we're going to be talking about it for the podcast, I was kind of being maybe a little, okay, this worked, this didn't work, a little too quick to decide. But its spell soon overtook me. One of the first things that sort of made me like, how would this be a buy it for me? I'm not enjoying the way this fucking guy is like treating her, and all these men are treating her are just driving me crazy. Yeah. Like for all these,
hard to watch.
It's the it's the equivalent. Like, I mean, this is again clearly man's perspective here, but like I've been trying to watch all of this black cinema and stuff. But if I were to tell me like watch a film that tells you what it's the experience of being a woman, it's like this is so got under my skin, and I was happy to hear that I wasn't the only one interpreting it that way.
Definitely that was my big takeaway too. So.
Like this whole thing just for me is about, it's like the horror of a woman pushing up against like what society or a male dominated society, expects of her.
Yep.
And it just irked me. But what, kind of like a lot of what we say with horror films, well, a lot of times like possession, whatever, what the horror, the supernatural aspects, the mystery, all those aspects, if the grounded aspects take you a certain distance or to a deep place, then that allows the horror aspects to then also fill that really deep space. So in the end, it was like, okay, all this stuff that is making me feel gross or whatever, I'm watching it as a horror movie, and it ended up being combined with, my favorite kind of horror is, or I say one that just, really appeals to me is the, we always talk about don't know what's up, what's down, what's real, what's not. And this just, it was working in all those regards. It felt like the best kind of offering of what independent film, can do, as far as just there's this energy and feel behind it that you're like, this is just not a Hollywood film. Like, yeah, it was made for $30,000 and you feel that for sure, but in a way that
Sure.
only lends itself to it in this kind of mood and disjointedness and just don't never have your feet quite on the ground. Mm-hmm. It moved quickly. There was footage that was lost over time. Anyway, I'm just rambling now, but I in the end, after really thinking on it, I've got to put this up with a buy it for me.
Okay.
Like, combined with too, just the filmmaking behind it. Like, how I was describing in Fiend Without the Face, I loved the professors, that kind of classic, like, I'm a professor behind my table smoking my corn cob pipe, and I'm intense in my studies on telepathy or some kind of
Right.
crazy whatever. Like, this was for me where you have these kind of seemingly like really straight-faced playing the game, like industrial filmmakers, but who had this totally kooky side that they got to really satiate with this film. And that sort of like I don't know however, I don't know the adjective that I'm trying to describe, but that kind of approach to filmmaking is this one I really love too, where like you can take the silly, the bizarre, whatever it may be, seriously.
Yes, that is true. Like when one of the Carnival Soul people is hiding behind a bush and like pulls the bush down. It's like super dorky on its face. You know what I mean? Like it's so dumb. He's like peekabooing basically. But like for whatever reason, in the style that it's shot and the moment that it occurs and all of that, it totally works. So cool.
I mean, yeah. We'll get into
I
more,
like that,
more of the elements.
I like that balance of like being right, towing that line of silliness almost and like scary, I guess.
They're doing it.
I think I've always liked that. Evil Dead 2, baby. So I'm a rent, mostly because I just don't think that it's something I would necessarily put on much if I owned it. But it's good.
Yeah. This ended up being for me like kind of like those, even though it really did disturb me. It's I can't think of a better word. It sounds hokey, but I feel very haunted by it all. Sure, yeah. And I think it's just one of those where like to own it is to help understand it, to rewatch it. And
Sure.
It's just the mood with the
upon further viewings, I would get more out of it probably.
Yeah, there's a lot in it. It's cool. A lot of interpretations and all that good fun stuff.
I mean, I basically agree with everything you said.
Awesome.
You know, so, but, you know, it doesn't quite get to buy. And we can talk about why.
All right, well, let's move on to our summary. It's basically just a story of woman being put down, pushed down, ignored, taken advantage of, treating
heard.
as being less than a person.
Yeah.
And it's the horror of that. It's her going, could just be all interpreted as her going crazy because of that. But there's more to it than that. That's just a very brief, how I would, how I took away from it, what I took away from it.
The story itself is very straightforward, right? What's the character's name?
Candace.
She has a name, right? Okay.
That's the actor. It's Mary.
It is Mary. Okay.
So it's basically Mary is just with some stupid friends who decide to. Well, actually, I mean, they're some stupid guys. Also, they get them to drag race. She's in the passenger side and fall off a bridge. She's the only one to crawl out. Everyone's like, "Oh my God, are you okay?"
Let's explain a little bit though. The important aspect of how she crawls out of the river is that the car has been submerged and they can't find it. Like they're searching for it to search for bodies, and it's been in the water for 3 fucking hours, and then she crawls out. Mm-hmm. Which is like a pretty good setup to be like, oh shit, something's up.
Right. But she's really excited to get out of there and leave that town and that memory behind. She's taken a job as an organist for a church out by the Salt Lakes. And she's staying at like what do you call it? It's not a bed and breakfast.
It's a boarding house, sort of. Yeah. I guess.
It's just one horrible leering creep.
Dude, the worst,
is the only
the
other
worst
one.
human on the planet.
And then not to mention, I mean, the woman running it too is
she's just unpleasant.
She's just she is just as much as like, why should I trust this young woman, you know?
Yeah. There's a lot of... sorry, I was going to start going into thematic stuff. Go on.
She wanders. She's, kind of drawn towards... Oh, this is after. She's also, as soon as she's entered this area, she's started seeing apparition of a ghoulish man staring at her. Right. So it's just sort of like is a combination of she keeps seeing this guy, and then she also starts experiencing people not being able to see or hear her. And sound kind of disappearing, like she's just getting cut off from the world.
Like she doesn't exist.
So those two things keep happening, and meanwhile there's this carnival, aka the Carnival of Souls, a pavilion.
It's an old abandoned pavilion, giant. It's huge. It's like where you would have little fairs and stuff. Yeah.
It was a 2-stage dance hall, the biggest between Chicago and California of the time. And all culminates in, she's big twist. I mean, the first of the endings was really cool, but big twist, she's been dead the whole time. question mark in that the sort of definition of what that means, as far as it's not as simple as just like, oh yeah, she's a ghost, because you have all these things of like,
Right.
okay, but she's talking to people. There's no, even within the twist, there's no certainty.
Yeah, I think there's an argument to be had that the period of time between her drowning and the car being pulled out of the water, her actual body being discovered, is a form of a limbo state for her.
Yeah,
and
a kind of in between.
A cool question becomes: was all of what happened from her perspective, right? Like, did she just perceive herself getting out of the water and having all these experiences, and that's the limbo state? Or, I guess, did she actually get out of the water and is essentially a dead person walking around?
I think the scene that's sort of second to last scene, which very could have well just been the last scene, would point to the latter, because it's a scene without her of them discovering where her tracks out into the sand, and then no tracks leaving where her body fell.
Agreed. So I think that's a cool question to ponder and explore and pick apart.
Yeah,
but
lots of open for interpretation.
Yeah.
So it's cool.
It
as
is cool.
good horror does, and is very different from other horror films at the time. You think of it like you had, a little 6 years later, Night of the Living Dead, but even that, and then all the kind of sci-fi
really
movies.
6 years later, 68 is Night of the Living Dead.
Pretty sure, yeah.
Damn.
He is inspired by, or
Totally.
saw this film.
No question.
I don't know, inspired by, but no, but yeah, so you had these kind of sci-fi films, and then you had Psycho a couple years before, films like that.
Mm-hmm.
But all those are examples of just, not straight lace, but just in our reality. There's no melding of that kind of what's real and what's not.
I would equate this closest to The Outer Limits, which came out a year after this. It's got that was the overarching vibe to me.
Definitely, yeah, Outer Limits, Twilight Zone have been a point of reference for this film.
When did Twilight Zone come out? I'm going to look it up. It came out in 59. So Twilight Zone had been around for a few years. So okay, it's got that going on. There's a similar tone and style.
It's right before the kind of the 60s as we kind of think of it culture.
Totally.
Came down. So almost it feels both dated and not in that way,
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, let's move on to next section here. All right, here we go. What worked?
What worked? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm. Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
Well, I think kind of a lot. We were already kind of jumping onto it.
Yeah, I was just listing things.
Yeah, that vibe, that eerie, what is reality? The unsolid ground under our feet thing is so. It's so. The first episode of The Twilight Zone.
It's,
you know what I mean? Like, that is that same, it's, in a broad sense, it's that same construct of the individual stepping into a world that feels totally wrong. And not, not even necessarily because there's something overtly, obviously going on, but that it's a feeling that things aren't right. If anybody doesn't remember, the first episode of Twilight Zone is the one where the guy finds himself walking down the street and in the middle of kind of nowhere, and he goes into a diner and there's nobody there, And he's like, oh, that's weird. And then he walks into town, and the town is totally deserted. And there are mannequins around. He thinks it's a person. And then he spends the whole time, he kind of just goes mad, realizing that he might be the only person on Earth anymore, that everybody just disappeared.
She doesn't even have that context. She's going mad in a way where it's like she simultaneously is being around people, is also being communicated to her, you are the problem here. It's not everyone else.
Sure.
You know, which is really the deep horror in this.
Yeah, but I think that the overt construct is the idea of the individual going mad slowly because the world around them is different. You know, like is something's up.
Right, but it's
they can't get an answer, and they can't get their point of view across.
And they're both, whether it's, you know, people being gone or seeing ghosts and getting gaslit like she does or whatever, it's all a metaphor for just kind of like our world is not ideal.
I mean, really,
pushing up against that.
It is quite relevant, you know, as in the context of the voices that we see today in 2020 coming to the forefront finally, and being able to say, yo, like, I exist and I deserve to exist and deserve to be treated with some semblance of respect and equity.
Right.
And it's so amazing to kind of watch something that's 60 years old, because, like, you could equate it to the civil rights movie, you could equate it to LGBT, disenfranchisement, like any disenfranchised group or marginalized group, maybe is a better term, I'm sure has felt this exact feeling, right? Walking through a world that either doesn't respect you, is trying to take advantage of you, or disregards you.
I mean, we all feel that way. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's a very fucking scary thing, especially for somebody like, you know, you and I, white dudes, who spent most of our lives never really having anything close to that experience. And so what's really freaky to me, and probably the bigger, broader, grandest horror of this, is the idea that white people are going to watch a movie like this and be like, oh, this is scary. It must be so awful. It's so awful. I'm relating to this concept of what it might be like to not feel like you exist for the first time while watching a movie. It's like, meanwhile,
right,
there's millions of people over all of history and up to today that have been experiencing that horror firsthand every day of their lives. That, to me, is like the true horror of this type of movie.
I just zoom out even further, like, but what are all those problems indicative of? And it's at its core, you have a world that doesn't value anyone outside of their economic input, you know, outside of, and that's, I don't know. I don't mean to compare my woes. Sorry. I'm just saying I related to this personally, you know, too. Sure. Like, just, you describe being not seeing the world, you know, they're universal horrors within, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everybody falls on a spectrum of their experience of that, you know. I just think,
I mean, this is just, the world is crazy at large, and she's constantly being, like, told to treat it as a poor little thing, and
right.
Going along with that. Or the guy, what's the guy's name? John?
Douchebag McGee?
Yeah, so he's like
worst fucking
putting
human.
things in perspective of like, oh, poor me, I'm gonna be lonely tonight, you know, as if like that's her problem.
Yeah. Well, what it is too, which is so just disgusting, and why that character is just on all fronts, is that it's this sort of purveyance of the commodification of humans in the realm of a patriarchal society.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that is fucking gross.
But then the tension point for her is she's so desperately lonely. So she's constantly wrestling with like, am I willing to accept this for any kind of connection?
Well, and
is
I think
that
it's a
connection
fear
if it's
too,
not honest,
right?
you know?
There's
like,
the fear element to how she's responding because of the fact that she's got this specter following her around, and she's like, it's so fucked up because it's almost like, I mean, it is like she's saying, at this point, I'm so scared, I'll take douchebag McGee to keep me company.
Which she does. She says, actually, I will, if you're going to be escorting me home, then I will go with you.
Right.
Is what she decides.
Like, imagine that. I'm basically, it's sort of like the scorpion and the, what's that thing? It's the scorpion and the frog or something like that.
She is basically saying, I'm so scared of you that I'm going to let you walk me home. You know, like.
Kind of, yeah. But it's like she knows his nature and she knows what he wants, but she has a bigger, issue to deal with, which is the greater world around her is, closing in.
Yeah, yeah.
That's scary. It fucking sucks for her.
When you started off all this just by describing like a certain mood that's pervasive in it all and feel. And what's so cool is I think that's just being supported, hit at from like every single angle. Like didn't mention up front the music. That's just this like super haunting organ score.
Yeah.
And then we have all of the casting of these people who are like not these Hollywood looking types.
Not at
very
all.
particular. And then you have what we already said, where like everyone down to like the doctor and the guy and the minister and the guy at the drinking fountain who like is totally just getting up in her face, but is like, oh, I just wanted a glass of water. You have everyone just kind of like, it's like, just get away from me for a sec. You have as soon as I was
everyone just spread out.
I was so mad at John at the beginning when he's like, hey, how about some coffee, eh? And he just sits down in the middle of the couch. Like, what? I hate that.
Dude, the second he pushes his way in the first time we meet him and he just pushes his way into her room and stands there, I was like, oh no.
Just
I
get
fucking
out.
hate you.
But then you also have just like from the get-go of the really bad looping in that like first scene.
Oh yeah, that
like,
was fucking weird.
But like even that, it just has it works for it. Like, and then even like they stole some shots in department stores. Is the way that is. The whole inspiration for the film was this location. Like that has this feel. The way that the ghoul makeup is. Like every single aspect of this is just. It's just working for it. It's working for it. It's so cool.
Well, and the photography helps all of those things along too. The photography is fucking beautiful.
I mean, I love that. When I first really noticed it was that shot where it's so good. It's like, I think it's the first time we see the soul ghoul face in the moving car, like outside the window looking in at her.
Yeah.
That was just like, I mean, I went, it was great. But
every time he showed up, I was like, ah!
Yeah, how that was that first, that's when I noticed. I'm like, oh, this is for their super small crew, whatever they do. That's very well lit. Like, that looks really great.
I tried to figure out how they accomplished not necessarily the shot of the ghoul, but the racking focus to her reflection in that window. I couldn't figure out whether or not it's in camera or if it was a comp, like the ghoul is sort of a comp. It's like what would you call it? They're laying two things over each other. But regardless, that when they rack from her to her reflection, it's perfect looking.
Yeah.
I mean, it's stunningly perfect looking. I was like, whoa, how the fuck?
God, just like all those shots of her wandering through the carnival pavilion.
Yeah.
There's
one shot that is all of the archways and pillars of the pavilion and it's all in silhouette. Mm-hmm. So you're seeing the dry lake bed essentially off in the distance, and everything in the foreground is the framing of the pillars and the arches and her, and it's all just silhouette. So it's super, super high contrast. It is such a beautiful fucking shot. I would, without question, take a picture of that and frame it and put it on my wall.
Cool.
It's like the greatest thing ever. There's something, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a matter of the types of lenses that they used or I don't know what it is, the post-processing of the actual film stock, but like there's something about this particular era of the photography and I think because it's in black and white, I kind of had this thought about Eyes Without a Face too. There's a real unreality to it where I'm like, this, it feels removed because it's black and white, but like I don't know actually how to describe this.
It's later era film quality black and white. It's not like the 1930s black and white film quality. It's really vivid and detailed, like films from around 1960 in black and white.
I think a part of it as well, one of the things I think I'm realizing I'm responding to is a really, really long depth of field. Mm-hmm. And what I mean is that means that there's in the space that's being photographed, the depth of field being long causes like most things to be in focus, right? In a depth way. So I think that creates this kind of, because our eyes work that way pretty well, but camera lenses don't often, like unless you're specifically going for that setting. In the
our
lens.
Eyes actually don't work that way very well. Like I'm looking at you on my phone right now, and my thing that's a few feet behind it is out of focus.
True. Like, in close proximity, our eyes don't do it well.
Totally aside the point. Sorry.
But if you were to just stand in a room and look out, a lot of that would be in focus. Your eyes can kind of make that happen. So what it does, I think, when you have a deep focus, or deep depth of field, long depth of field, whatever, and everything in the image that we're watching is in focus, even though there's depth to it, that it creates this strange crispness that, I don't know, just aesthetically has an effect. I don't even know how to describe the effect, but I really personally like that effect.
It's like sharp 35 millimeter versus 16 millimeter. A lot of times when we think black and white, we automatically have the association with 16 millimeter black and white of like, an industrial or, whatever, non-film,
right?
Non-movie film. Or
so
like,
I think, that there's an aesthetic that is super pleasing, and then you put it in this world that they've created, and it becomes even more freaky and cool and pleasing and whatever, et cetera, et cetera.
I think the moment where I was like, the film really, really won me over in the horror sense was the big centerpiece dance, the big dance macabre when she's on the organ in the church, and it's just kind of this like frenetic dream, like, just she's pounding away, playing the organ. She slipped in, and then we just get the visual of all these ghouls and ghosts at the carnival dancing in fast motion, and it's just got this like, oh god, it's like dancing skeletons or something. It's like even more just kind of unnerving than that. It's kind of how it can be difficult for us to think of, death as a celebration in a culture that, doesn't do that at all, kind of thing. I don't know. There's just, it's really brought up something deep and unnerving, those visuals. And then, of course, just as a scene, then culminating to her being, asked to being let go because she's playing like, he doesn't say the devil. He doesn't say the devil's music. I forget what he says. He says something like, tarnished music, or I forget what he says.
Yeah, it's some veiled, you can't actually express yourself.
No, that's what he wants, but in a
non Christian whatever.
Well, that was something
way.
I thought it was so. I only realized it thinking about it after the fact, but it really works in it is like you do the classic. You have someone who is not religious or spiritual at all. Not just to the point of being just kind of like, oh, not into it. She's kind of like actively anti it. Like she makes a point and kind of bases her identity on like, oh, trust me, I'm not going to the church because I'm religious, not because I like the church. She's not just like, oh yeah, it's just a job. She's like, it's just a job, like
right.
taking it to that extent. So just that classic kind of having that character be put in a supernatural situation. It's just like watching that person breakdown,
Yeah,
God,
and the trailer said to us, walking the tightrope between heaven and hell.
Yeah.
I guess that's what she was doing.
Yeah, exactly. Some little touches too I thought were so cool. You had the both of the big times when she's walking around the world and no one can see or hear her and sound disappears for her. It's interesting. Both times she snaps back is because of a bird chirping.
Yep.
Really interesting. That was, intentional.
Yeah. I wonder
what my read on that is, I don't know, but
something
it's
about
cool.
nature.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, nature being the... actually, I was watching someone talk about this film afterwards, comparing it to, this was like David Lynch loved this movie and was talking about Twin Peaks. How in a lot of films you have, or things that are, go into bizarre territory, you have the in-between character. So in Twin Peaks, it's like the log lady is kind of the bridge between two worlds. And I think often nature is that. Yeah, absolutely. So...
Well, my love of crows and ravens, they are considered the in-between, the bird or the whatever spirit that flies between the two worlds.
I love the kind of like reading about the Native American interpretations on what nature means and telling stories of like, it's not a crow, it's then crow met fox. And, as these totem energy totems. It's cool.
Yep.
God, yeah, the location that inspired it was great. Yes, the big middle dance scene. I don't know, man. For something I loved so much, like it was quick and to the point too. Like 70 something minutes, I think, is the ending time. Even though I'll get into things of note, there was originally longer, but like it works. Like I remember watching it whenever I did before and not being too into it or feeling like it was long or whatever. And it was great stepping into it this time and it feeling anything but.
Yeah. The minister calls it sacrilege.
Yeah, sacrilegious music.
Like, dude, calm down, bro. Like, take it easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, for me, the real there's many successes, I guess, but one of the things that's most successful in giving us the creeps, giving me the creeps, I guess, was the depiction of men's interaction with her. That was the first thing I said up front.
No, that's like the horror that oh God, yeah.
And I just wanted to give another example of how they do that really was poignant, I think. All of it's great, but the first guy that she interacts with, the church guy who recommended her for the other job, he gets up on her and he's all over her. He stands like right against her shoulder. He puts his hands on her shoulders. He's like pushing his face like over her shoulder from behind and like talking to her from it. Like everything about that immediately made me go, oh fuck.
Do you mean, was it a church guy, or do you mean, wasn't it like a whole organ parlor, or like an organ warehouse?
That's
thing
right.
Kind of place?
Yeah. The guy who, yes. He's an organ recommended vendor. Her to the church. Yeah, I guess he's an organ dealer.
Yeah. Someone's got to do it.
Yeah.
Right? So there was even a deleted moment where like someone else saunters in toward the end, and like they say to each other, like just they call her like, oh, poor little thing, like, you know, just that, like she's not a person. Ugh. She's just like a pet, like a little thing.
Yeah. Another individual
confused,
moment. There's a couple with John. Obviously, they're all
my God.
Gross.
Can I say the one that I think I kept thinking of you? Like, I wish I was watching it with you because of how just like not distracting it was, but just like was when he gives her no room to sit next to her on the couch, and it's her shot, and you see his hand is just like right like on / next to her like the whole time, and it's just kind of like awkward and there, and like what is she thinking about? She like moves a little, and his hand is, you just can't look away from what his hand is doing.
She reaches over to look out the window, and she has to like move her arm up and over his arm because it's like there. It's just there. And she like tries to and he just kind of leaves it there, and he like moves it a little bit to get out of the way, but not really. He just kind of leaves it. Dude, that whole scene, the coffee scene, it's so gross to watch. I mean, to his credit, he's really good at being gross.
Yeah, he's it's also like how that scene starts too. It's like after we're so on board with like, okay, she's should be cutting this guy out more, but she's doing it, and at least she's, you know, not putting up with him too much kind of thing. She's putting her foot down somewhat. She's just a little disconcertingly cheery when he first walks in. Like, wait, you're really like being this nice to him after all that? But you really see that is, it feels like it's the only time in the movie and the last time in the movie where she's trying to put on a normal face.
That's right. She's essentially...
quote unquote normal, an accepted face.
That's right. She is kind of rotely behaving the way that the society has told her to behave.
Mm-hmm. And then once I started looking at it from that angle of like new morning, new day, I'm just going to try to put my visions I've been seeing in my nightmares outside of everything. Mm-hmm. Ha 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 ha. Oh, John. Ha ha. You know, it just made it this other level of disturbing.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think women have been told that that's the way you go about your life. You let it all slide because you have to. Mm-hmm. It's so fucked up. Anyway, I like the moment when she's like, "Let me wash those mugs for you," and he's like, "I don't want to, you know, it will just ruin the taste for later."
Yeah.
What? You fucker. He's so gross. Like everything he does and says is just so like, bleh.
I mean, yes, and that is also great, like his character because of that. You know, the way he is the added dimension. I don't know.
I mean, I want to know
what the way where he was
how
like
they put him together. You know what I mean? Like how much of that was writing, how much of it was directing, how much was it him bringing shit to it? Like
he cracked me up to just the way where some of his lines were he's like, "Oh, I don't know about any of those big fancy words. I just live in work in a warehouse kind of guy." You know,
I'm just
he has
an average Joe.
That whatever that accent is, just is great.
I think it's called 50s douche.
Yeah, but isn't it like? Yeah. It is. It's not regional. It's like, hey, how you doing?
Technically,
what's going on?
Technically, that vocal style is called Mid-Atlantic, which is a made-up dialect.
Got it.
Which is kind of has a cool and interesting history. There's a couple fun. What do you call that? Little video essays on Mid-Atlantic if you want to get into dialects. Anyway, so I like that. I like the first time she loses her hearing, her connection to the world. The department store stuff in particular is so fucking good, as you said. But all in all, what it makes me realize, too, is just like how captivatingly interesting she is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And
that's what I should have set up front when I was saying like all the aspects, and I said casting, but I should have specifically mentioned her, too.
I mean, she didn't do anything else. I mean, you know, like she was in a couple little things here and there.
She was whatever it means, a Strasberg-trained actor, like fresh out of that school.
Yeah. which I went to.
Cool.
But man, even just the aspect of how her eyeballs essentially, because her eyes are a little bit set wide on her face, and the angles of her face, she's got a very angular face as well. I don't know if this is something that is actually happening to her, but her irises, or the actual eyeball of her eye, or the color of her eye, the middle of her eye, whatever you want to call it, they don't very often, especially in 3/4 profile, they don't look like they're both looking in the same direction. They look like one eye is slightly looking outward to the other. And it just, man, it creates a very, very strange sense of like disconnect. She almost doesn't feel real.
Has this quality to her, I'm trying to think of how to describe it too, where it's someone who you feel like they should just, their default or their strength is sort of carrying like a certainty or a confidence or something, or like an assuredness, yet she's in the face of everything going against that, you know?
So I think what's happening, which I think is super fascinating, she's actually doing nothing. She's doing the exact same thing we talked about that Scarlett Johansson is doing in Under the Skin. She's at almost pure neutral almost all of this film. There are times, obviously, when she gets expressive and she's doing stuff. But the vast majority of the time, she is just neutral-faced, relaxed, eyes open, looking forward. And I think because of the context of the film and the vibe and the tone and all those things and the shit that's going on around her, are inserting these elements to what we think is going on with her. And it's really fascinating to watch, because I was struck often throughout. I was like, holy shit, it's so much like Under the Skin in a lot of ways, in just that element of like her demeanor.
I mean, even if that's just, you know, the kind of thing that happens, whether it's her or ScarJo, it's like, it has to be, though, that they both have very different qualities as people and actors that just are kind of inherent. So it is just, I was just trying to think of like what is it about her that's like, I don't know, just this makes her just plug in so well for this kind of story. And that's why I was thinking in terms of like, how she carries herself as a person. I think, since I didn't know the Strasberg angle, but I can tell you something about the Strasberg stuff. In that acting method, one of the first tenet of that acting method is to practice being totally relaxed. And so there's this whole set of exercises where you sit in a chair and you're kind of off to one side so that you're sitting out of your normal comfort, right? Like you're not sitting into like how you would normally sit. You sit upright, you sit a little like skewed, so you're only on kind of one butt cheek, and then you spend a good half hour letting your arms hang and checking in with your body all over, and you start doing this thing where you're just sort of like arbitrarily moving your body around to see where there is tension. And you get, eventually, as you practice that, you get to this state of not total, but you're trying to get to this sort of state of totally relaxed and neutral with no tension in your body, but you're also connected to your body. It's a really interesting exercise and thing to go through over a long period of time. I was with that school for about a year. And you get to this point where you can really quickly snap into it. You can sit there and go, okay, give me like 30 seconds. And then you're like, ooh, I'm there. And what she's doing in a lot of the film feels like the result that I've seen with that type of exercise. She's kind of presence.
She's super present. Her face is very relaxed. Her eyes are open and clear, which is a thing that you see end up happen over time as people do this method. And I wonder, I would go back and watch. There's another thing that is sort of the next thing that you're taught, which is sense memory stuff. And so before you get into the actual memory part of that, you start just trying to experience senses. So you imagine senses. So you like sit there and you imagine sun on your face, right? And you get that, you practice that method of like tapping into your physical senses.
So in the case of this, it's like she's really reacting to a ghost when she sees it.
In a lot of ways, yeah. I mean, she's really present and you can kind of feel it. I think that's what we're feeling. And I wonder if she just, this is a byproduct of her training.
Something else about the Strasberg training that they mentioned in one of the special features, and be curious if you say this is true too, but they said that a big part of the Strasberg method was always involving reacting against who you were acting alongside and who you were interacting with. Something in those regards. So that they sort of came up against a wall when they were talking about, okay, well, this is a movie where you're essentially not actually interacting with anyone the whole time you're dead. And that kind of threw her for a loop for a sec, they said. But then like she was so just good at, asking the right questions for herself on the situation that she did great.
Yeah, I think that part of, if I remember correctly, part of the point of the methodology that you're going through with Strasberg stuff is you're doing all these things so that you can be totally present with the other person and open to react to what they're experiencing. And so it really grounds you in this sense of reality. You're in your body, but you're also super open to what they're presenting you with, so you can react actually. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. I mean, there's another whole thing in the method of you can actually see scenes with famous Strasberg people or the actor studio people where you can see them holding their hand like under a desk or whatever. And like part of the personal object thing is that you imagine you're holding on to some personal object that was important to you. And you're using that like tactile memory of how that thing would feel in your hand to kind of compel how you are feeling in the scene.
Well, she sure is feeling it. Another one of my favorite bits is just how it all culminates, where she kind of arrives at this dance that she envisioned earlier, where it's just like the classic. I loved it. Where when I say classic is where you're like assaulted by maybe a sinister group, and it's like, and then you can't do anything but fall and get just entrenched, consumed, and it's just the classic like them coming down, covering the camera to black. But it was just like that, having that set up halfway through of this dance really getting to me, and how they all were like moving in fast motion, and then just to be there and chased by them. It was like, get away. And all she could do was run out to the ocean. And then I kind of mentioned it briefly earlier, but I loved it, and almost would have been fine. I mean, with it just as the ending and not the river, her being in the river too. But that was just so cool. I loved that so much, because maybe I'm always coming from the side of like people going, oh yeah, whatever, she's just dead the whole time. So to have that ending where they follow her tracks out and no one is there, or her body is not there, but you see where her body was and there are no steps leading away. It's just like, I loved all these, all these people, however, the adjectives we use to describe them, these fucking guys basically being like put up in this inexplicable situation with like, just to give them that little bit of hint of like, oh, maybe she actually wasn't crazy. Maybe doctor, you should have actually like listened to her and not just like drawn pictures or whatever you're doing with your back towards her. Like,
I think we know what he was doing.
That doctor too is just so like, also just like, just get your hands off her. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I love that their reaction to being like, well, the her body was here and the tracks stop, and all right, back to work.
And we mentioned this a lot, but even from probably, 10 years outside of this film, like you absolutely see the ending coming. It's going to be something like, oh, yep, she's still in it at the end. Like we always say, yeah, but when you do that first or early enough,
that's right.
It works. It's it in its purest form.
Yeah.
And that, definitely takes the cake there for me too. It's great.
I think the last thing in that sequence that we mentioned, the chase around and under the pier stuff is really the environment of all that entire sequence is really great. And I love that we get to see her ghoul form or whatever you want to call it dancing with the guy. She gets to see herself in that form, and that's really sort of the culmination of the whole thing. And it's just great. It's cool, and it's shot really well. And
for me, being like a California kid too, there's always something like a little scary or disconcerting about like the idea of being in the middle of and totally separate from your oceans. So to have a body of water that's not the ocean, it can just feel a little more like imitation or something like that. It's weird. I know it's not like that. Lakes are real, but they're great too. I love lakes, but just something about the like building this thing around this lake. And I'll tell you in the things of note a bit like about why it was made initially, which just brings this whole artificiality to it all.
That's an interesting concept because I don't know why abandoned sort of lakefront or oceanfront like places like that, boardwalks. Like if you ever been to, well, I'm sure you have been to like the Santa Cruz boardwalk like so early in the morning that nobody's there and it feels wrong because it's known as a place where lots of people are. That's how you know it. So when you take the people out, it feels there's a ghostliness to it. And I've always loved that. That's why I love ghost towns. Like that kind of setting is super, super pleasing.
It's how Disneyland's looking like these days.
Yeah.
In quarantine.
Like that movie, what's the Disneyland movie? Like something about Tomorrowland or whatever. It's cool. I think I recommended it at one point.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all I got.
Classic. Great. Well, let's move on then. I want to say more just to make the point of how much I think it's good, but no need for that. I've said what I've said. I'll just be digging further. So let's move on to what did not work.
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
It's hard because, like, Tim, as I said, everything that I was wanting, that I was like, oh, yeah, it didn't work. This was bad. The looping's bad. How they're all beating up on her and putting her down. It's bad. I don't like it. Like, I can't say that. All that did work for me in the end as a horror movie, as in the overall feel of this. So, honestly, maybe I'll agree with whatever you bring up, but I didn't have anything down.
Well, you won't because you already said it was something that worked. For me, the organ music is super effective a lot of the time, but there are times when it seemed like it wasn't working. And I don't exactly know why. I think maybe it's just that the sort of, the what would you call that? The feeling of the music was a little, of the actual organ was a little antithetical to what was going on in the moment. And I think maybe part of what it is that because this is so Mary's story and we're so on board with her state of mind, that at any time the music kind of, moved away or wasn't quite matching her experience, I was like, that feels wrong. Now, having said that, maybe it's right because it continues to give us this sense of everything's wrong.
I mean, what I love about it, how the fact that it extends, for me, it worked at like in that the Carnival of Souls isn't just this carnival.
Okay. Huh.
You know what I mean? Everyone's, yeah. It's an extension of so much more on a certain level.
Yeah.
The whatever the Carnival of Souls means in its deep metaphor way, it's pervasive in this story.
You know what? Oh, this is going to be a thing that works, I guess. So, fuck. Well, it just occurred to me that you can reverse the metaphor. What I mean by that is the idea of a Carnival of Souls, of a bunch of sort of trudging along, kind of seemingly zombified beings.
That's our world, baby.
It's our world. Oh,
that's
fuck.
What you see.
Yeah, like they're not dead. They're representative of the patriarchy.
Mm-hmm. Or slave to the idea of workism. Again, your value is, which is patriarchy. That idea of you have to extend force and always.
And having that sort of old pasty dude be the main dude. I mean, maybe we're pulling this out of we're projecting our personal reality right now onto what the intention of the movie was.
But it's also a reality
a
then and before and between. Like,
yeah. Can I think of anything else that didn't work? You know, this is a dumb thing, but it really, really bugs me when people are playing instruments in camera and what they're doing doesn't even come close to matching what the music is. And it's only an issue because it's just distracting to me.
Was it happening here?
There's a long high to low over the shoulder, like very high,
So I remember that. I remember that shot and thinking that, and then again, it just added to the overall effect because all I was doing was questioning, but as soon as I was thinking it didn't match, I'm like, oh wait, no, it looked like it just did. And organs are kind of funny like that too.
They are. I agree.
So,
yeah,
that worked for me too. I noticed that.
I mean, there are dumb continuity things for sure, but whatever. Like her hair's not wet when she gets out of the water. It's like, come on, guys, just dampen it up.
Yeah, but she's a ghost, Tim, or something like that.
Yeah, that's true. I'm really reaching here. I got nothing.
Well, then that's fine. If we only talked about more things that did work for what did not work, then so be it. I do have a good amount of things of note.
Oh, okay, let's get into it.
Great. All right, here we go. Things of note.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
Just for I guess more reporting back, there are deleted scenes and a whole a half 27 minutes of outtakes, which basically is just deleted shots. I guess you have deleted scenes and deleted shots. But it was kind of interesting and is actually for different reasons that you had these deleted scenes. So you had a whole 8-minute sequence right before, I think it was either the middle dance scene or the final dance scene of them kind of, he's describing it something as the pillars in the water, them coming out of the water or something like that, but something with an emerging ghouls that was deleted. And then you just also had these little bits throughout that were cut down just because of it was originally a double billing running time, or that they were going for. That then, those wherever that exists on film was lost or destroyed too. So he only included that. And when I say he, I mean the director Herk Harvey. That Herk included re-edited back into the home video release, but now the version that is that home video release. It's different because it was just video quality. So when you do the actual restoration for DVD Blu-ray now, or restoration screenings now, it's missing those scenes that were put back in for literal video release. But it was kind of fun seeing all those. They're all on the Criterion Channel with it, or the Blu-ray if you get it. There is like her running away from a van that like almost hits her because it doesn't see her. Just a lot more stuff of her kind of like going around, whether it's the department store or the town. Just kind of a lot of, missing heads and tails to different scenes, things like that. Herk Harvey, I already explained him and John Clifford, who wrote it, were just buds working together at this film company, doing their thing. And they just decided, hey, he said he was kind of inspired by, as he said, Robert Altman had just finished his first film, and I think had come from a similar background. So they're like, well, we should do that. So this is where the number 3, there's a weird thing with the number 3 for this film, Tim. So he took, so they wrote it in 3 weeks in their off hours. John Clifford wrote it. They took 3 weeks vacation to film it, and they took 3 weeks to edit it too. And it was a 6-person production crew with a AD, the DP, the sound person, and 2 University of Kansas students.
The budget was $33,000.
Yeah, and the budget. Sorry, forgot to mention that. The budget, $33,000. Yeah. Yeah, there's like a partial commentary I was listening to. He said when the actor Candace like first showed up and he had met her, she was like kind of dressed hippie-like kind of style and had a certain quality to her where he's like, oh, this isn't right at all kind of thing. And he was trying to figure out how to let her go and to break it to her. But like the next day when they met or whatever, she just had a totally different feel and look to her, and he was all of a sudden like, oh wait, this is the character. Cool.
Just one thing on the 3s, our boy Zach Bagans would tell us that the 3s are the mocking of the Holy Trilogy by Satan, or Holy Trinity. So just beware, this movie might be Satan.
It's got those elements to it in there of this atheist being pushed up against the minister. It's cool. Hey, and guess what the shooting ratio was, he said, for this film? 3-1.
Oh my God. And it was a double feature with The Devil's Messenger.
So also a fun thing was like when the writer was asked like, well, how do you attribute the success to this movie? Those kinds of questions. He just said that it was just as simple as like, they just trusted their creative abilities and they weren't trying to replicate anything else. They weren't saying, oh, this worked, let's try to do it. They were inspired by independent productions, but they were pretty much like, hey, we've been making films forever now. This guy has written a book. Let's just do it.
That's the way to do it.
And then they knew it was starting to kind of have a success when, as he put it, they started getting letters from young people wanting to know more about the production. And it was really fun. Herk Harvey is actually one of the stars of the film. He plays the ghoul.
I figured he would.
The main guy. And he said his cameo was a matter of both ego and economics.
Cool.
So many fun little ways they described of their guerrilla shooting too, were like when she's in the dressing room, they paid the clerk $20. He just offered her, hey, can we give you $25 to look the other way as we shoot this scene real quick? That's all they had to do. The guy at the beginning who started the drag race was also the production manager. So this place, the pavilion, was called Salt Air. One word, Salt Air. And one fan of the film they were interviewing described the background of Salt Air as it was the Mormons' attempt at being normal, which is why I said, like, maybe why this is like the kind of a creepy thing to this, but he sort of described it as this was like, thing made by Salt Lake City Mormons and everything, but it was sort of there coming from as like, hey, this kind of like dancing, boozing, all this kind of, rowdiness associated with these kinds of things. It's like, hey, we can have just as much fun ourselves,
Wow.
Straight-laced Mormon fun. Reaction to that. It had a mixed reaction when it was released initially. where in the sense of the kind of picture that they painted was all the locals who they showed it to, anyone out there, were just kind of like not crazy about it or didn't know what to make of it because they were viewing it as is this a Hollywood film? That was their standard of what a film should be. So when they saw it, they were kind of like, oh, there's something about this feels different. It's not me, so it's not a success in that sense. Yet in Hollywood, as he put it, everyone on the West Coast, he was saying on the coasts that they were into it because it had this independent sense to it and felt different.
You know what else it reminds me a little bit of? Just a little bit, is 8.5. It's got a little bit of that eeriness and floatiness and sort of like otherworldliness.
That movie really, I don't know, it made me feel weird. 8.5, like in a way that felt not intentional to.
No, it's a weird movie.
Like this, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't into it. It really disturbed me in a way that, like this movie, it's a horror movie. I felt like in the end, what was that? Was that quote I said, like, was it last week's movie? That was something like, the scariest movies are movies that aren't horror movies or something like that. Forget what that context was.
Yeah.
Anyways, it was great. There was this whole little documentary on the reunion screening that they had. That was like the first time they're all seeing each other 27 years later when it got its, like, I think 89, 90 re-release. And they were talking to one of the original investors at the screening. It was just fun hearing him talk about it, where he was like, well, yeah, we're in the real estate business and these were good customers who need some help making this film. We thought they had talent and we just thought it'd be exciting and be a nice break from real estate. So when you hear of like, and trying to raise money for films, it's true. It's like, it's just about getting people. It's not because they're necessarily expecting to get their money back. It's because it seems fun or exciting and they want to see the movie,
Yeah. Or just be a part of making a thing.
Yeah, exactly. Believe in the filmmakers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And during its kind of growing cult status over the years, it was fun to hear the actor Candace, what's her full name? Candace Hilligoss. Played it. Her talking about where she opened the newspaper or whatever magazine and started reading, saw a headline that said "The Film That Wouldn't Die," and it's like, oh, what is that? And then once she realized it was her movie, she had acted and had anything else, just like freaked out and was super excited. Saw her picture on the next page or whatever. It was fun.
Yeah.
The guy who plays John, it was fun to kind of hear him talk about playing the character. He said he was kind of laughing at, he had heard his character described as the definitive study of a nerd in lust and a greasy on the make dude, were two descriptions of his character that stuck
on
with
the
him.
make.
Definitive study of a nerd in lust. He, back in late 80s, whatever, wanted to be the chairman of the University of Houston drama department.
Good for him.
He also got compliments on kind of that shot, or someone noted to him that shot of the close-up of his eye, like leering at her, how they were like, oh man, that looks so glazed over and creepy. Like, I didn't know, what were you doing for that? And it's because that was not a real eye, or it's a dead eye. Like, that eye doesn't work. It was, so when he was couldn't actually see anything through that eye.
What?
Which explains why it had maybe that kind of look to it.
What the fuck?
Which I noticed, you see, like, super, like, early when we're meeting him, you can kind of see his eye, delay or whatever a little bit, but then you don't really, it doesn't do it too much. You don't notice it later.
I can't believe I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, you're pretty attuned to things like that. Salt Air, it's just like one of those classic locations where it's like, it just has a history of always burning down and getting rebuilt, at any given time.
It's still around.
So I don't know if it's still around, but back in, what was the year? In 83, it got, they rebuilt it for the 80s crowd or whatever. And 1 year later, after rebuilding it after so long, it didn't get burned down, but the Salt Lake, it rose up and kind of turned all swampy. It basically got stuck in the water. It got flooded.
Whoa.
It destroyed at that time, or the opposite of a fire. And then I have one more thing Do you want to hear it? Do you have anything?
God, I just want you to hit me with it so hard.
All right. Well, I saved it for last because I think it was really cool as far as just an example of reinforcing, people wanted to know just like, okay, so what was the twist? Oh, yeah, so that's what it was. A kind of definitive answer on these things that, no, the horror in it lies that there is no answer. It's open for interpretation. And a part of like that kind of attitude of like wanting the certainty is like, oh, you just ask the filmmakers like what their intent was. So all they really talk about is, their intent was just to make a good movie, but inspired by this, inspired by that. And they said they liked that it was open to interpretation. But then a lot of those further fan questions about what their intent was, they're basically like, this was interviews with them 30 years after, 27 years after. They're kind of like, I don't really remember all of that. Or like who decided on this line to do the certain decisions. They just don't remember. So I just love the idea that within you can't consult the filmmakers, rather than forcing a filmmaker to be like, it's open to interpretation, just chill people, like just try interpreting it yourself for once. It's like it's forcing anyone with that instinct to just accept that because there is no definitive answer from the filmmakers involved because they simply don't remember. I just, I love that about it.
That makes me think of, I've always had this sense of like, in some of the scripts that I've worked on and, the intention that I have behind them, and then thinking about whether or not people are going to pick up on that or they're going to pick up on other things that I didn't think of or whatever. And then having that imaginary discussion where it's like you're in a scenario where somebody goes, so when you were doing this, like, did you mean to do the whatever? And I always think if I'm going to be in that position, I kind of just want to answer with, well, what do you think? Like, how did, it doesn't really matter if it was my intention or if I meant to do that thing. Are you getting that thing from the art? Great. Then yes.
It just kind of informs the idea too. You just do your best, make a good movie. Those things will follow.
Right.
Interpretations, ways to look at it that you didn't, but are still correct to it.
Yeah.
Things like it's possible to put things in a movie that you didn't realize you're putting in and still be the one to put them in or whatever.
Yep. Did you watch the remake of this movie?
I didn't know that existed.
1998.
I'm kind of afraid to
I bet
know
it
about
is. Well, it's produced by Wes Craven, if that makes any difference.
I don't know.
No.
A lot of horror filmmakers produced by Quentin Tarantino, produced by Guillermo del Toro. Okay.
I bet it is
Presents
fucking awful, but I'm going to reserve judgment.
Oh, actually, last couple things on. It was just fun hearing from the writer too, like basically defending it at the time and making the points like, hey, everyone now they say that you see the twist coming and that's kind of a given. He said not only at the time for 1962 was that just not true, but when he didn't know that ending when he wrote that beginning, he, just when working on it, just kind of did a version writing from beginning to end. And that just brought up the question for me. It's like, oh, it's kind of interesting is any of that infused in the film itself, that energy of like the fact that he didn't know where it was ending when it started, is that help the beginning kind of set it off on the right trajectory of, he didn't see, the writer didn't see it coming. So does that lend itself to the movie and not seeing it coming?
I just had a thought too. This movie is basically Beetlejuice.
It's a lot of things, but why Beetlejuice? Another one of my favorite films.
Just because they drive off of a bridge and die, and and then they're caught in this weird sort of limbo state.
Yeah,
that's it.
Totally.
That's as far as it goes.
I like they're making comparisons
the makeup
to something
on the man is kind of like the makeup on Michael Keaton.
Yeah, right. You're right.
Kinda.
Oh, by the way, it was so funny. I'm talking about kind of Herk Harvey's, their professionalism, but brought to their love of the ghoulish and silly. At this years later, 3 decades later, anniversary screening, he was wearing his full makeup. It's like
Amazing.
his voice is so just like very just direct, exactly who you'd expect to narrate and make these kind of industrial films.
That's
So it
funny.
was fun seeing that. Oh, and their deal with the city for being able to drive the car off the bridge was they're like, okay, all you got to do, the stipulation is you got to get the car out of the water and you got to pay to fix the bridge. So they were worried, okay, it's going to be a big expense for our budget fixing the bridge. He got a bill to fix the bridge for $12.
What?
Just basic, like,
Get some wood and some bolts, fellas.
Yeah, exactly. So pretty funny.
Amazing.
Even by 62 standards, not that bad on their 33,000 budget.
Cool. I mean, you do realize that $12 in 1962 is like $84,000 today.
No, I didn't. Pocket change, either way.
Right. Cool, dude.
Great. Well, thank you, Carnival of Souls and Herk and John and of course Candace and everyone involved. Good work.
Good job, guys. You did it. Candace is still around. She's 84. She's kicking it.
Cool. Yeah, he said at least back in 89, 90, she was living in Beverly Hills writing.
Yeah, I just looked her up. She's she makes appearances and does signings and stuff like that. She's out there and active. She's got a website, all that fun stuff.
Cool. All right, Tim. Well, should we move on to Carnival of Souls and see if we have any recommendations? And then we aren't going to pull a film if you want to. I don't know. We can pull a film and do it for 2 weeks from now, 2 episodes from now, or just not pull out the end of next film.
Let's just ring the bell in what do you call that? In honor of the movie that we're not going to watch because it's our 100th episode. Ready?
Yeah, our skull bike bell means usually is reserved for going to see a movie in theaters, but in this case, it can also just mean we are not.
It's a solidarity bell right now.
Yeah, exactly. Great. All right. Well, what's your recommendation?
Which one should I do? I've watched a couple good things lately. I'm going to do Perry Mason. The, what's it called? The HBO series that just started up.
I hadn't heard of it.
Yeah. There's only 2 episodes out so far, but it's
cool. Set in 1932 Los Angeles.
Yeah,
cool.
It's cool and it is dark. Woo! I'm not going to say anything because that would ruin it for all y'all.
Is it just to get me excited to watch it or not? Does it capture old LA well and you see it and feel it?
It does to a degree. There are certain things that it's not overtly being like, see old LA, see, but it's giving you the feeling of it. So they're picking their set locations well. I will say that the case that he starts on, the initial event, so to speak, takes place on the Angeles Flight Railway, which is a sort of a tourist spot in downtown LA. And that all looks really good. Like I don't know how they did it, if they comped out the actual surrounding buildings and put in, comped in old school buildings there, because those are definitely not there anymore. But or if they just made a model of the thing, I don't know, but it looks awesome. So
cool. Yeah,
it's really quite good. And, be prepared. Like, we know Perry Mason as sort of like a courtroom drama. This is more of a PI, like, detective story, which is so my thing.
Cool.
Like, I fucking love it. So, and it's great. The actors are all great. And, the story is freaky and creepy. And, hopefully it continues to be good.
Awesome. I will recommend Ed from 1990. Have you heard of Paris is Burning documentary?
I have heard of it, but
It's really cool. It's all about like New York's Black Latinx drag ball scene where they had like there's this whole incredible culture of like different houses that compete in these elaborate themed balls, like fashion shows almost, or like performances kind of thing.
Okay.
And it was just like, everyone in it is just like so fascinating. It's such a character and just delivers this they kind of go like, okay, here's, this term that only exists in this world and explains it kind of thing. So it's so much fun just to like pick up on the lingo and just neat entering this whole world that, since it's, 80s scene. It's the scene that started, I think, in like the 50s or 60s, but then kind of, I think, started to die out sort of after this, the 90s came along. But super cool, fun snapshot on all that, on that community. Paris is Burning.
Nice.
Directed by Jenny Livingston, who's like straight out of film school, put the money together. It's cool.
Nice.
All right. Well, yeah, we rang the bike bell. We're not pulling a film. We've been on a good string recently after some clunkers.
Yeah, right.
So we'll be excited to see what episode 101 brings us film-wise, what starts us off on our new, not decade, whatever you call it. And then, tune in. We'll be reflecting back next week on our first 99 episodes. Maybe Carnival of Souls will show up. Everything from Babysitter, episode 1, to Carnival of Souls, episode 99. Woo! Tim and I will talk about it. We're going to come up with some fun stuff.
It's cool. It's like we've basically done this for 2 years.
Time flies, man.
It's wild.
Yeah.
All right.
Great. Well, we'll end this as we always do, and just say, if you enjoyed this, please tell a friend. But if not, that's fine, because your listenership means a lot. It means
means everything.
means it all. I was about to say, whatever that means to you. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening and being here.
And we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.